I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano, and this is Freedom Watch. Mayor Michael Bloomberg has covered New York City with surveillance cameras, which is troubling, considering the long list of things that New Yorkers can't do because the mayor thinks they're illegal, like serving trans fats and serving too much salt in restaurants. He even took a trip to England recently to learn from the British extensive security system. But at the very time we in this country are moving toward Britain's Big Brother example, the British are getting fed up with the surveillance state. The new Deputy Prime Minister, Nicholas Clegg, says the government will limit surveillance, limit the personal data collection, the use of DNA profiles, and the spread of closed-circuit TVs, as well as abandoning the National Identity Card program. Here in the U.S., where citizens are supposed to be secure from unreasonable searches and seizures, perhaps we should be learning not from the British surveillance system, but from the new British reaction against the surveillance state. Here to talk about that reaction is the British member of the European Parliament, Daniel Hannan, who has been a fierce critic of overreach by both the EU and the British government. Daniel, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Judge, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're a great American patriot.
And you are a great defender of freedom, and we're happy when you're here. Now, Daniel, who said this? Quote, "It's outrageous that decent, law-abiding citizens get treated as if they've got something to hide." Was that Margaret Thatcher, or was that the leader of the Liberal Democrats?
I'm going to have to go with the leader of the Liberal Democrat. I think she'd have said it a bit more ringingly than that.
Yeah, all right. What is it about Liberal Democrats, which in America we associate with big government, that are talking about natural rights and human freedom trumping the surveillance state that the Labour Party has installed in the past 13 years?
Well, I think the truth is that over those 13 years, the Labour Party, under the guise of security, and in some cases understandably, because obviously there was a different security situation after 9/11, and we'd suffered as you had.
Right.
Under the pretext of contingency, extended state power in all sorts of ways. Now, some of those may have been justified, but the vast majority were really nothing to do with an increased security risk. I mean, the big one being identity cards, which you mentioned in your list there.
All right.
No one tried to show that they would make anyone safer. It was just about the state extending its control over citizens.
When the British government, when the Labour government did this, did the Conservatives object? Was this a big government versus natural rights argument? Or was it a big government versus a little bit less of big government type argument?
Yes, it did. The Conservative Party did object. And our main objection was this. It's that when you have a new situation, for example, let's say that you're trying to deport somebody who is a dangerous Islamic extremist. You may not have him, on CCTV planting a bomb, but you have reason to believe that he's dangerous. You shouldn't pass new laws until you've exhausted the armory already at your disposal. And there was a kind of a very typical politician's reaction, that whenever there's a problem, the answer was legislation.
Right.
So rather than using the existing common law remedies that we had, laws on incitement, laws on affray, and indeed not least laws on nationality, because a lot of the problem was coming from people who were not British residents and really didn't have the automatic right to be in the UK, instead of touching those things, they passed themselves, they awarded themselves sweeping new powers, really, so that they could show that they were doing something. It's this terrible politician's temptation to say, look at how active I'm being, look at how to measure your virility, if you like, by the extent of the legislation that you're passing. One
of our founding fathers here had a statement that I know you are familiar with because I've heard you use it. It's Benjamin Franklin, when he said those who would give up essential liberty in order to obtain a little temporary safety deserve and will end up with neither. Are those arguments made in Great Britain? Do people say this is contrary to our national values? Over here we would say un-American, for the government to watch everything we do, for the government to treat us as if we have something to hide, for Big Brother to be literally in our faces on every street corner?
Yes. I mean, we're the most surveyed society in Europe. There are more closed-circuit TV cameras now in the UK than in East Germany under the Stasi. So there is definitely a public reaction against this. But I think we should be honest. I mean, your listeners, like you and like me, will react instinctively the way that you just spelled out. But there is a constituency that would trade liberty for security. They wouldn't put it to themselves in those terms. But there is a constituency out there that says, don't bother me with these kind of abstract, highfalutin arguments about the rights and liberties of the freeborn Englishman when there's a madman about to put a bomb on the subway. And to convince those people, instead of arguing from first principles about the Constitution or about libertarianism, I think it's much more effective to show that what's being proposed wouldn't make you any more secure. So you would have the loss of liberty without any commensurate gain in security.
Absolutely. Is it things like this? Is it the suggestion that everybody should carry an ID card with biometric information on it? So a policeman swiping the card would learn your legal and your medical history, as well as who you are and where you're coming from and where you were when the card was last slashed. That has generally resulted in a reduction of trust in the government in Great Britain and in the United States.
I'll tell you why, Judge, because it alters the relationship between state and citizen. That, you and we are a free society. We have this common law tradition stretching back to Magna Carta and beyond that to the folk right of inherited Anglo-Saxon freedom. We are not continental Europeans who need to be given our freedoms by the government. And the idea that if I'm not breaking any law, if I'm not committing any offense, that a uniformed agent of the state has the right to stop me and ask me who I am, I think is outrageous. And it changes my relationship with him and with authority generally, because the agent of the state ceases at that stage just to be a citizen in uniform and becomes a symbol of a government that is exercising control over me. So there is a fundamental problem with ID cards. We had them introduced during the Second World War. Shortly afterwards, there was an old man who used exactly this argument. He said, I'm not breaking any law. I'm not going to produce an identification paper unless you give me some good reason why you think I was behaving suspiciously or whatever. His case came to court, and there was such public outrage that the law was changed and identity cards were scrapped, and we've never had them again since. So, as usual, I would much rather vest my faith in the sturdy common sense of the majority of my countrymen than in their leaders and their bureaucrats.
Just switching gears a little bit before we let you go, one of the things that Nick Clegg announced was a statute which would permit the recall of members of Parliament. Has that ever happened before?
No. I mean, it's an idea, actually, that he's swiped from me.
No wonder it sounds so good.
I've swiped it from you. I mean, I've swiped it from a number of U.S. states, and I co-wrote with a British MP a book a couple of years ago explaining how we could use recall, grafted onto British political conditions. As happens when an idea gets purloined like this, there's always a danger that a mistake is made, and in the current proposal there is a real flaw. What they're saying is that the recall should happen if a member of Parliament has been found guilty of some financial impropriety or corruption.
Oh my. Oh.
Now, in other words, that means that the people who get to decide who's recalled are not the local voters, but the Standards and Privileges Committee of the House of Commons. In other words, you could have a situation where a committee of MPs effectively could remove one of their fellow members from the legislature, because once somebody has been kind of fingered like that as corrupt, there's no chance that he would survive a recall vote.
Right.
I hope that we can improve this in the passage and in the amendments of the bill as it goes through. It seems to me that the whole purpose of recall is that it has to be a spontaneous local popular initiative.
Absolutely. Daniel Hannan, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge.